Hello, and welcome to this episode of Ways to Change Your Workplace with myself, Preena Shah. And I'm really pleased to be talking to James Wild today, who is the CEO of Men's Shed Western Australia. Now, many people won't know what Men's Shed is. So, James, I'm going to ask you to introduce what Men's Sheds are all about first. But before that, I just want to do a little bit of an introduction to you myself, James. I have had the pleasure of knowing James for a number of years now, and James is a very talented guy. His thing is to be an advocate for not-for-profits, and he's very much focused on helping not-for-profits to realize their social impact. The impact that they're making to society. And then James is very talented. His other talent is painting. And prior to starting here, we've had a wonderful conversation, and I've seen all around your studio where you are now, James. So conversation to be continued another time as well about your painting. James, welcome.
Thank you.
First off, could you introduce yourself and then tell us what the Men's Sheds are all about, please?
Oh, well, my favourite subject. I'm not very good at talking about myself, but I'll give you a potted history. As you said, thanks for the lovely introduction. Men's Sheds of WA is where I am now. Been the CEO there since December 2019. I'm a board member of Fremantle Foundation as well. Director of an organisation that's still operating in the UK called Clear Aims, which I'll explain a bit about that to you in a minute. That's kind of a similar space, health and wellbeing space, and member of the Institute of Consultants as well. So kind of
you wear many hats.
Many hats, and this is probably this has been me for a number of years that I get bored doing one thing, so I've got to have many things on the go, many paintings, and as much to occupy my mind as possible. A bit about my background. I've been in, as you said, I've been in not-for-profit space for a number of years. I was at Lottery West for about 6 years. I've worked in the health and wellbeing space for probably over 10 years now through my UK organisation. And that's really been focused on mental health, emotional intelligence, identifying individuals' learning styles and their multiple intelligence, really finding what's happening in people's lives, what's motivating them, and kind of what they need to do to change and to move on in their life as well. So that's kind of that's a pretty much an online business now. That's been going for some time. But while at Lottery West, I was there in their community development space, grants and community development. That's something that I've been passionate about for quite some time now, really, because a lot of organisations that you see that are in the not-for-profit space, the community, the voluntary organisations, don't have the resources, the capacity. They don't have a HR team and an organisational development team. They don't have the governance in place, so they need some external support to move them along and help them, really. So that's something I've been really keen about. Not so much the grants, really, funnily enough, at Lottery West. And I think this was a bit of an ethos in the grants and community development section at Lottery West, that the grants were a vehicle to help and to move organisations along. The community development, the advice, the engagement they had with the organisations, how you link them with other organisations, how you built their partnerships, that's really what provides the strength in those organisations. So that's kind of where my heart's been, really, for a number of years, is that community development space. Towards the end of my time at Lottery West, and this kind of again mirrors some of the work I'm doing in the UK, I was involved in social impact, so managing the social impact team and the strategy team.
Yeah.
And that's really about measuring that impact, understanding the benefits that are happening in those communities and those organisations. So, yeah. What else have I been doing?
You're a man of many talents, as I said, and I think that's why we get on as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, it's just kind of feels like spinning plates at times. So there's that many things going on, but it's very enjoyable, and they're all kind of linked and all have a similar space that they operate in.
That's it.
And that kind of takes me to Men's Sheds WA, where I am now. So,
can you tell me more about Men's Sheds WA, James? We have listeners globally, and I don't know if Men's Sheds are a global thing or if it's a Western Australian thing. What is Men's Sheds WA?
What is Men's Sheds WA? I think, firstly, what's a men's shed? That's some people are aware of what the men's sheds are. The statistic that I keep seeing at the moment is that there are more men's sheds in Australia now than there are McDonald's.
Good.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
Positive for health and well-being, which it just shows that, I mean, this is probably about a 10, 15-year-old movement at the most.
So they're a movement. How did Men's Sheds start?
Well, it was at a conference over East where they were talking about men's health and well-being and how can they facilitate better well-being for men and a better solution for men to come together, to work together and to share kind of experience. And this was, like I said, it's going back a number of years, but out of that, there was a number of sheds that just started, and they're all separate incorporated associations, and they all kind of just, once one or two started, communities and men could see this across Australia, that this was a gap and this was a void that needed to be filled in their area. They're all different. They all have kind of different activities and different projects that they work on. Many of them, probably 90% of them, have got some kind of woodwork facility in there and some kind of workroom in there, whether it's metal work. But they're all engaged in different projects and have different initiatives that are running. Some we've got that have photography groups, some have walking groups, some have singing groups. So there's a whole range of different activities that take place in them. But underlying all of them, and this kind of goes back to that initial conference, is health and well-being. Is how do you promote health and well-being for men, and particularly that there's a number of findings that you see kind of associated with the men's shed movement. One is the phrase shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
That men are less comfortable talking. This is kind of speaking very general terms.
Yeah.
Less comfortable speaking face to face. They'll be happier sharing information, sharing personal things, shoulder to shoulder. So be it at the football match, watching the game, standing at the bar in the pub, or at the workbench in the men's shed. So when they're actually kind of in a less confrontational situation and they can chat to people side by side, that seems to work very well. So as underlying all of the men's sheds is this concept of health and well-being, but the sheds don't promote that as a draw to get people in. It's not come to the men's shed and will help you feel great about yourself. It is activity led. It's about, there are things to do, there are things to participate in, you feel part of a community. And the health is the other phrase that you hear quite often is health by stealth. It's you'll come into the men's shed, you'll participate, and it will have positive impacts on your own well-being by being part of that.
That's cool. So in Western Australia, that's what we can talk to. Who can join a men's shed?
Well, anyone. I said there's 180 or over 180 men's sheds in WA. There's probably about, I think 60% of those are out in the regional WA, 40% in the metro area. And we're an advisory body, so we don't mandate how a men's shed operates or how it works. We just advise them about what they can do and kind of give them a nudge in this, back to the community development, nudge them back into the right direction. They are open to men primarily.
Yeah.
I think
at any age.
Any age. Well, it's different for different sheds.
Okay.
I'm just while I'm chatting, I was drawing up some of the stats that we've surveyed that we did last year. 100% of WA sheds have older people in them. So they are really a draw for senior age people and for people entering into retirement that want something to do in their lives. 80% of sheds have people that identify as having a disability. So that could, predominantly that might be an age-related disability, but a lot of them support a lot of younger people. Cultural, linguistic, diverse communities, 30% of sheds have a refugee or migrant members. What else have we got? Regional remote communities, as I said, 60% are regional remote. There's 11% of WA sheds are dedicated to Aboriginal people, so and have a very strong Aboriginal focus. And 30% of sheds have women members as well. So we see sometimes in the media kind of a bit of a pushback around why are we having men's sheds, why are they exclusive spaces? Quite often they're not. And this is something that we're particularly keen about promoting across the men's sheds network. Is the shed, it's an unfortunate name really. The men's shed is the group of people that comes together.
Yeah.
It's that opportunity for guys to come and have a chat with each other and to participate in some kind of meaningful project. The building that they operate in is not really the shed. That's just a community facility. So quite a lot of those sheds have their men's shed group will meet 2 or 3 days a week, might be more, and then they'll use that facility for other community groups for the rest of the week. It's
a beautiful movement, and I love the fact that while you oversee and you help from a community development perspective, every single shed has its own flavor to meet the various needs of whatever community that they're in. I've actually been to the men's shed at Joondalup and for some help. I had a broken chair, and the guys there were beautiful. They helped. They loved taking the project on and just fix my chair. So
they are great at that. And what they don't like doing really is stealing work off local tradespeople.
Yeah.
So if it's a sizable job, if it was building your house, for example, they wouldn't take that on. But something that's a small job that they can work on as a project, and they can share some of those skills as well, because that's a key part of the men's shed. Is some of these guys have had trades for a number of years and they want to pass their trades on, they want to pass their skills on, so they'll work on these projects collaboratively.
Beautiful.
I think you hit the nail on the head really, that the sheds are they reflect their own community, and this goes back to that kind of Lottery West community development concepts, which we wouldn't want to go into a community and say, this is how you operate a men's shed, this is what it should be, this is membership, it really has to come the other way. It has to be ground up, it has to be built from that community to say, well, what are the needs? And when we go to the new shed meetings where they're pulling a group of guys together to say, well, we want to start a shed, the first thing we say is hold a community meeting, bring people in from the community, and then ask people, what do they want? And we've seen that as well. I said quite a lot of men's sheds have a woodwork focus, but there are some, the Wanneroo men's shed has a very strong focus on rebuilding and refurbing computers. So for people in communities that can't afford a brand new community, and families that can't afford a brand new computer, the Wanneroo men's shed has a group of guys that come together and kind of refurb old computers. So that there's some really interesting projects that happen in different communities, but that reflects what they want to see out of their own shed, really.
It's beautiful, James. It really fills me with hope, and I want to set up something women's related one day. I need to talk to you offline.
Interestingly as well, I mean, taking it back to the sheds, there is a women's shed movement that's starting up, and we've seen a few pockets of interest across WA, and we've had a conversation down in Rockingham around a women's shed starting, and the conversation we had was very similar. Why don't you look at the facilities, look at the local men's sheds? There's a shed starting up in Baldivis that they're looking at their plans, and we got the two groups together and said, well, why don't you just talk about, even if it's in the short term, how do you share those facilities so that they work both groups. So while we are Men's Sheds WA, we still want to be supporting the women's shed movements as well. There tends to be a slightly different focus on women's sheds. That men's sheds, the blokes want to come together, they want to chat, they want to potter. And I once heard a comment from someone in the men's shed movement that quite often you'll find a lot of these projects won't get finished because they're working on them, they're happy to work on them, they're happy to participate in something that they can collaborate on. And it's more about that bringing the people together, bringing the guys together. But the women's shed movement seems to be very much driven more on, less on the health and well-being side, more on the developing new skills that we want to learn, kind of the way around the wood shop and the metal work.
Oh, cool.
We also find out very quickly when I start talking about men's sheds that my technical knowledge of men's sheds is pretty limited. I'm not the best at work, not the best at metal work. And I feel like a fraud sometimes going into the men's sheds when this, because I think being the nature of the role, they start talking to you about drill sizes and apertures, and I have no idea, to be honest. I can talk about community development, I can talk about government and presenting the shed up to government, but yeah,
I love it.
A lathe and a thicknesser is pretty limited, really.
James, so my thing is all about finding ways to change your workplace, and I've got some stats here. So the issues that men potentially face in the workplace at the moment is things around, life being on autopilot. Vulnerability is the new normal, but how for men? So, you talked about talking shoulder to shoulder rather than eye to eye, which is what, the workplace really talks to. Men are dealing with a new wave of political correctness. There's gender, there's race, there's inclusion. There's a lot coming men's way. And I know I have heard also that some men feel like they are a minority in respect of all of the other various issues that are bubbling along, within the workplace. And the question I often get asked is, what about men's issues? Men's sheds, I guess, contain relationships and forge new partnerships where men can, I imagine, have conversations of all sorts and build new partnerships of all sorts as well, James. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is there feels like there's a change in the area at the moment, I think, and we're very mindful of this with sheds. Particularly around things like inclusion and diversity. And as I said, there's often comments in the media around women's shed movements and engaging women in the sheds. And what we want to do is support the sheds to make informed decisions, really. And quite often they don't have, as I said, they don't have the resources to go out there and kind of research what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. I think one of the things that Men's Sheds WA as an organisation is very well placed to do is to bring those sheds together and to identify not what they should be doing, but the benefits of working in particular ways. So the more inclusive you can be in a shed, and this is taking inclusion at its widest context, really.
Yeah.
It's promoting across all of the sheds. Well, what are the benefits of this? How does it support the guys that want to work in the shed? And probably an example of this, we've got a conference planned, fingers crossed that it goes ahead later in the year, in November, where we want to bring the sheds together to talk about inclusion as a theme. So we have, the topic of the conference, I think, is inclusive, thriving sheds. And the thriving part of it is key, really, because it's not just being inclusive for the sake of being inclusive. It brings an opportunity to the people in the shed. So inclusion could be, as I say, cultural, linguistic, diverse communities. It could be Aboriginal, people with a disability, people that are suffering from mental health, people, ex-service people that need some support. Inclusion should be about how do we open our doors to the widest number of people. So I think hopefully we're ahead of the game in this space with men's sheds, because there will always, if they are separate incorporated bodies, there will always be sheds that say, no, this is how we want to operate, this is what we want to do. That's equally fine, that if that's how they want to operate. But we want to make sure that sheds every now and then just take a look up and look at the community that's around and look at the people that need support and say, how can we help? A good example of that is we have an initiative at the moment, which is wellbeing and health officers. We call our WHOs. So the WHOs go out, they are volunteers in their own shed. So I think about 46% of the sheds have their own WHO, so their own wellbeing health person. It's a voluntary role. It's just someone that, it's not a doctor, it's not a professional, it's just someone that people can go to in the shed and say, I need a bit of support, who do I go to? And we provide them with resources and information, a directory of referral organisations that they can go to, so they can support other people in their shed. So it has a focus then back on this wellbeing and health space. But one thing we'd like those sheds to be considering is, well, if you have that role in your shed, it shouldn't just be for the men in your shed, it should be for the men in your community. So if people need some support, can you be the conduit in your community to support a lot more people and a lot more men with health issues and the like? So it's as I was looking at inclusion in its widest context. It's not about just what you can do in your shed, it's about what you can do in that wider community and support as many people as possible. And to be honest, there are some phenomenal examples. There are some really good, you go down to the Fremantle men's shed, they've got groups for women, they've got a whole range of people in the community that participate in their shed activities. And I think they run projects with Access Housing, trying to fill a space that they can see in the community and not duplicate efforts that are already happening, but realising that, well, if we take a look up, we can see that these people aren't getting support. We've got, I think, Fremantle as an example, I think it's got well over 200 members in their organisation. So they've got a small army of people that can tackle a wide range of issues, really.
Such a beautiful concept, James. And, one of the things, and this is me generalizing again, so talking in general terms, it is said that many men link their self-worth to their job. And then once they retire, and, I've helped a number of men as well through coaching, once men retire, it's that now what kind of phase where, what's my purpose? How do I give back? Men's Shed really fit that void, I'm sure, in many men. And I really, looking at your background and the work that you do, and your British organization, your work at Lottery West, and how you've ended up where you've ended up now, James, it seems like all of those dots have been joined for you to lead this beautiful not-for-profit, which is quite the movement to make society better.
Yeah, well, it's terrible. So I'm going to give credit to my mother-in-law for this. So don't show my mother-in-law this video.
I love you.
I had a conversation with her a number of years ago, and it was about an individual that we both knew that he wasn't kind of maximising his potential, for example, as probably a kind way of saying it. Wasn't doing a great deal with his life.
Okay.
And she had this really very logical mindset and very logical comment that she said to him was, you've got 24 hours a day. You sleep for 8, you go to work for 8. What are you doing with the other 8? And it made me think that really you've probably got, it's around about 70 hours a week, unless my maths is wrong, about 70 hours a week that you spend at home with your family, doing the things that are kind of in another space. And you all know this better than I will, Prina, from your org development days. It's that third state. It's don't let work define yourself. You've got your home, that's your kind of your stability. But a lot of people just are seeming now just to see that extra 8 hours a day disappear.
Yeah.
And it's impacting on the families, it's impacting on their own well-being. They're not occupying that third state. So that third state could be going to sports, it could be part of your local surf club. It could be a range of different things that tap into what drive you and motivate you. And I think particularly at the moment, and I laughed as well when I saw this. It was I think it was on the end of your email, was please excuse if you see an email from me at an odd hour of the day, don't feel you need to respond.
Yes.
I think 90% of us at the moment could have that email, because I'm guilty of that. At 1 o'clock in the morning, something will pop into my mind and I'll send an email out, and you forget on the other side that someone else might hear that ping and start reading your email. But work is gradually consuming more people. I think it's consuming our time, it's consuming our efforts, and our and because it's doing that, it's hard not to be defined by work. And you see this in the men's shed movement, particularly the guys that are retired. Their work was their purpose. It got them up in the morning. It's what drove them. It's what their sense of pride, their sense of well-being, their sense of self-worth. And once that disappears, what do you do? How do you fill that space? And that's where we see kind of depression creep in, and all of these mental health issues creep in, because there isn't a suitable space. And I think that the one thing I would strongly recommend, and as you mentioned, I paint, and I've got a number of paintings around here. That for me is one of my third spaces. It's the place that I go to that isn't work, it's not family, it's a bit selfish. It's just something for me, but it's the thing that if I don't do it, I can feel my mental health and my well-being decline. So you've got to have kind of that additional something in your life, and I think that's why one of the reasons why men's sheds are popular. And popular, because they're finding, not only is it just, well, I can go and hang out with a bunch of blokes and we can have a chat and there's a bit of banter and we can all get along, but there are meaningful community projects that sit behind those. So that they might be, we've had some really astonishing stories. Some of them, like there's one of the men's sheds, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to offer, they were building concrete reef blocks. So you could put your ashes in one of the reef blocks and you could be buried at sea. So really unique. Yeah, but these are meaningful projects for their communities that people can participate in. And that's what gives you that sense of purpose.
100%.
I think there's again, you all know better than me. What's the Japanese model? Is it your Ikigai?
Ikigai, you got it. Yep.
There's a flaw in that for me, that it kind of tries to direct you towards finding a career that does all of these things.
Yep.
And we don't have that really in our lives. You might have a fairly mundane job that doesn't fulfill you, doesn't give you a sense of purpose. And I think that's where sometimes you can use that third state, you can use that men's shed, you can go to that sporting club and you can build some of that out of that space as well. I think this is what one of the pieces of work I was doing in the UK, the online work that we were doing, very much tapped into that space. It looked at different motivators for people in their life and tried to use those motivators to help their well-being and their self-esteem build.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I completely see the way everything joins together for you, James. And so, you know, men often want to help, and you're talking exactly to this, but without helping themselves in finding that third space or that extra thing for themselves, you're not going to be useful for anyone else. And I love your men's sheds vision, if I can read it: enhancing their well-being and health and enriching their lives and the lives of people in the local community. Help yourself before you can help others as well. Beautiful.
Well, yeah, and I think that one of the focuses, as I said, at the conference this year is around inclusion and building a diverse shed for the local community. But you're right, it's primarily help yourself first. Help yourself get into a space where you're happy in your life, you're feeling fulfilled in your life. One of the speakers at the conference is a professor at the University of Queensland. Again, hoping we can bring him over. But he's done some astonishing work around predictors of mortality. So the signs that you are, if you're going to lead a long and happy life, what are those kind of indicators? And out of the top 10, you've got things like don't be obese, don't smoke. You seem to almost quite blasé to say these as just don't be obese, but this is kind of what the the data says. The top two are social support and social integration. So social support being your immediate family, your friends, the people that you can rely on for the important things in your life. And the social integration is that wider community group. So if that's, I was amazed, kind of gobsmacked really at the fact that these are higher than all of these other predictors of mortality, that if you don't have these in your life, you're less likely to lead that long and happy life. So I think that's, again, it's finding those spaces that you can build that network of people that will help you, and then from there you can then start helping other people as well.
Absolutely. James, in the show notes, I'll put all of the details about the men's sheds, your UK organization, and anything else that you want to share with me.
Yeah.
And just a note out there for people who are interested in looking up men's sheds, please go forth, go have a look, see how the various groups, various communities will support you and the needs that you have, or see what you can bring as well, right?
Yeah, that'd be real good. Thank you very much for that. I think we've just got a new website in the making at the moment, so it's kind of had a soft launch. We just send it out there, and we'll fix the errors and tweak it as we go. But the website has got a find a shed facility on it, so it tells you all of the sheds by the local ward that they're in, the local area that they're in. So yeah, you can find who's in the area and see how you can either join the shed, participate in their activities, or support them, or even get some support from them if you need something fixing. Or what's the other thing we've said? Sharing, caring, and repairing. So if you need something,
love it.
full of very snappy phrases, I think. But if you need something repairing, pick the phone up and have a chat with the shed, and there'll always be someone that can have a conversation. A great example, just very quickly, was through the painting. I'm part of the Wanneroo Joondalup Art Society.
Yep.
And they needed, for their weekly painting groups, they have portrait painting and landscape painting groups. They wanted a number of easels, and they didn't want anything flash. They just needed something that supported the group. So they went to the City of Stirling Men's Shed, and they built them 20 easels that they could use for the group. So that for me is where these things start. Yeah, when you get one community group helping another community group to do what they need to do, that's when you can see all it starts to work then, really.
It's beautiful, James. James, I have one final question for you before you finish. So this is all about finding ways to change your workplace in relation to everything that we've spoken about men in society, in work, etc., and men's well-being also. If I was to give you a magic wand, what is one way you would change the workplace?
For men or in general?
Up to you.
I think something that I found particularly hard, and this is not speaking ill of organisations or what's in either here in the UK, is flexibility. I think, and we're seeing this particularly now with COVID, organisations are having to be more flexible and have a much more flexible approach. For people to, as an example, when we moved over to Australia, my wife was working full time. I was looking after the kids. I was doing the school runs, and I started working part time and working on my UK business in the evening. I needed that flexibility to manage that home life.
Yeah,
I think particularly for men, there is still a bit of a stigma around that, and I think it doesn't help either men or women to kind of try and box people into, well, you're the bloke, you need to go off to work. And there's still that culture in a lot of organisations which isn't that supportive for men that choose to be the kind of, not prime carer, but the person that has some of that home responsibility, really. I think that flexibility, hopefully now, one of the positive byproducts of COVID will be that people start changing their organisation cultures. There'll be more working from home, more opportunities to do that. But I think underlying all of that is particularly again looking specifically in the men's space, is if you don't have that flexibility, then that's when work can define your life. It totally consumes you, and we're all guilty of not working 40 hours a week. We're guilty of working 60, 70 hours a week, and we're losing all of that other time, space to spend with our families and to do the things that can really give us some sense of self-worth.
100%. We've got a way to go yet in breaking the stigma still, I think, of men as the breadwinner and why should men have flexibility. There's a lot to change yet there. That's a really good point that you make, James.
There really is, and I think the positive change in that as well is in the language and the language around gender, and I see this particularly through like my daughter's generation. There's much more openness to the language of people that identify as male, people that identify as female, people that are non-binary, and I think that will make it much harder to try and put people into these predefined boxes as well in the future. So it'll be hopefully a positive thing that happens.
The future is bright, but we need to start now to make those changes happen.
It is, yeah, and I think it is something that men should really be taking up the mantle of, is how can they not just try and chase that ideal of being the breadwinner. How can they look at, well, if we are operating, particularly as a family unit, how do we operate collectively? How do we operate flexibly? How do we all contribute in that space? And I think it's a bit of a generalization. There's so many families, so many blokes that do this very well. But yeah, just listening to some of the language along the way particularly when I was at home and looking after the kids and doing the school drop-offs, it was a very strange looks I got sometimes. There'd be predominantly mums dropping the kids off and one or two dads, and there was just why are you not the person at work? And I think we need to be a bit more supportive of each other, really.
Yeah, beautiful way to end.
Is that one thing? Agree. That's probably
one
a lot
thing.
of things.
No, it's one thing, which is a big one thing. Thank you so much for your time, James. I could talk to you forever. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Next time I'll dress up a bit more as well.
All good. I'm in my trackies down here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.